In the 1980s, Hasbro was on track to surpass Mattel, owner of the Barbie brand, and gobbling up numerous competitors and becoming the largest toy company worldwide. In 1984, Hasbro partnered with Takara, another competitor of Mattel, who had created the popular Japanese doll Liquitex in response to Barbie. Hasbro took Takara's series of robot to car transformers and turned them into the popular Transformers series, but Hasbro also gave Takara permission to reproduce their My Little Pony line, which had been going strong since about 1981 or 82. Hasbro reproduced Transformers with no changes, taking the original Japanese designs and selling them under a new name, but Takara had another idea with the ponies. While the US releases of My Little Pony looked like this, the Takara brand My Little Ponies looked like this. Yes, they were little anthropomorphic ponies who wore clothes. You can see their design reflects a lot of Japanese pop culture icons like Hello Kitty, the Moomins, and Sylvanian families. Why did I decide to make my own Takara brand My Little Pony? Well, these ponies were only produced for about 1 year, and I thought they were really cute when I found them. They're basically impossible to get on the secondhand market, and even when they show up, they're super expensive. What shows up on the market are baby fakies, which are off-brand reproductions of the baby versions of the Takara ponies, and even those are sometimes pretty expensive. So last year I decided to start 3D modeling them, and it's been like 6 months since then. In this video I'll show you 2 ways I went about making my own Takara. One entirely digital 3D model, and one physical version out of clay and fabric and paint and all that good stuff. Obviously, as I do not have a Takara pony, the reference photos I used are pulled from archiving website Ghost of the Doll and photos posted by users of their own Takaras. I'll put links to those in the description. User SoSilver on Flickr posted the Pinky doll that is on screen in 2012, and Heck Yeah Pony Scans on Tumblr posted this Takara that's all white with like bluish hair that I also use as a reference later in this. Also shout out to the MLPTP forums where users helped direct me to more references, and one user posted their own Takara with a tape measure to show proportionality for people wanting to 3D print the result. While I'm talking about photo credit, I'd also like to add that I don't know who to give sculpting credit for the original Takara ponies that I'm basing this model on. The original My Little Ponies were designed by Bonnie Zackerly and sculpted by Charles Munchinger. And while we know a little bit about Bonnie, who designed them, we don't really know that much about Charles, and I had difficulty finding sources, and I didn't find any interviews with him. I'm not very good at searching Japanese language internet, so if you have any resources as to who the actual designers of the Takara My Little Ponies would be, I'll like check the comments and pin one if anybody has sources. I make most of my 3D models by blocking everything out in simple shapes in edit mode before sculpting in the sculpt mode and retopologizing. When I move all the little vertices, I'm just using my mouse in one hand and holding down G in the other for grab. You might also see me pulling multiple vertices to make new squares, and that's holding down E for extrude. Other useful tips are S for sizing and R for rotating a group of vertices. And then I'm moving around the screen a lot. The speed up makes it look a little bit fast, but it's a lot slower when you do it at normal speed. But Shift plus my middle mouse button can move the viewer around, while middle mouse button alone rotates the viewer. Once I'm happy with the shapes that I have, then I use the remesh modifier to automatically remesh all of the pieces into one contiguous. The sculpt tool just requires a mouse and has a bunch of settings you can click to decide what you want to do and how you want to do your sculpture. So pretty much all of this like modifying and sculpting is done just using a mouse. It also has a mirror setting to mirror your edits. Some people start off with simple shape, like just a box, and they just sculpt on top of it. There are ways to do that. But I prefer boxing out first so that I have an idea of the shape, and then I essentially just refine it from there. Once I'm happy with the sculpture, I trace the whole thing with like a new set of vertices, essentially. I don't know if you need to do this retopologizing step in order to make a 3D model. It usually helps with animating if you're making a model for a video game. In this case, I was retopologizing so I could essentially cut off its arms and limbs and add the joints. And since the joints have to be ball joints and are very exact ball shapes, I didn't want to do the balls by eye. When I began this project, I tried to reference photos as closely as possible, but I will be honest, this video only shows my first attempt out of maybe 5 or 6. By the end, I was looking at it by eye, more or less. I wanted to show all the main steps in the process, like blocking out, retopologizing, adding joints, etc. But when I started recording, I didn't realize how far this project would go and how much I would learn. I do think I've become much better at Blender after doing this, and I feel like making an object in Blender like this, like a toy or copying something that you just have photos for, is pretty good practice. I ended up repeating these steps multiple times in making this 3D model, so I won't make you suffer through every single repeat. I also didn't record it because I didn't know if I would finish this because of my perfectionism issues. In the end, the best method was definitely to make the arms and legs and head all separately from the body, and then joining them to make the ball and sockets cleanly. This project took a lot of trial and error, and I tried to get it as perfect as possible, but that's not to say that it was 100% perfect. If you've made it to this part of the video, instead of just skipping to the end, which is also fine, if you want, congrats, and here's a sneak peek of a possible upcoming project I've been working on at the same time, but it's not done yet. The idea for this is for it to be a full-sized anthropomorphic ball-jointed doll inspired by the Takara ponies. I haven't recorded nearly as much of this, but if I ever get it printed, I'd like to make a video on it, so, you know, if you see this, put something in the description about it, or in the comments about it, because then I will know that you watched this part. The last couple things for this 3D model were giving it a little mouth, which is just a hole like the original doll, and then making a baby pony version. Like I said, the original Takaras had the baby ponies, which were simpler sculpts and more common on the market, and I thought it would be fun to include a model of that too. You'll see all of that and the finished sculpt at the end of the video in comparison to one another. So, unless I get a sponsorship by a 3D printer company, I do not at all have the money to afford a 3D printer. I do have a library card, and my library has a PLA printer, but I would have to pay for the PLA and ask them to print it, and I haven't yet, because I don't have any money. In case you're wondering, I don't make any money off of YouTube, or at least I haven't yet. So instead I decided to just make a doll out of clay. After months of working on the 3D model, I ended up just sculpting another doll out of clay, using all that I had learned from making my 3D model, but in real life. I thought it would be fun to show this in the same video, because I can show you the different techniques, and ways of like putting the joints together and test some things out. Plus, this is like way more accessible for people to do, if you wanted to make a doll like this, and you can't get a 3D printer, you can probably get clay, so that's good. This doll was more of an experiment, and I had a different sort of theory for how I tried to do the joints this time. The original Takara can twist its head side to side, moves its arms up and down, basically in like one plane, and twist its legs so it can sit with its legs out to the side. Ball joints allow for a lot of flexibility, and that's how I did my 3D model. And you all probably know that I've made a few handmade ball jointed dolls, as well as some wire dolls. The easiest type of doll by far is wire, but it obviously wouldn't look perfect, because it wouldn't be able to be like a solid piece in the same way. And since I've already made the 3D model ball jointed, I wanted to try something different than both of those. So I got this beige colored clay, which is called Cosclay, a type of polymer clay that also has rubber in it. And my idea was that Cosclay could bend, or could theoretically bend, similar to vinyl. And instead of creating ball joints, I could make a hollow body and solid arms and legs, and then simply kind of rely on the flexibility of the rubber to keep the solid arms and legs in place. So instead of using an elastic string, like a ball joint, you'd be using the elasticity of the clay itself to kind of tightly hold the joints. So I ended up making the body out of Cosclay, trying to make it as thin as possible, and the arms and legs out of the solid air dry clay that I already had. I don't want to spoil you too much on the final result, but I would go with ball joints if I were to make this again. It just didn't work super well. Cosclay isn't as flexible as things like vinyl, and it's also just, I've had so many issues with Cosclay since I got it and started using it for things that need to be flexible. Yeah, don't recommend that. I had also actually purchased a new brand of air dry clay when I did this project, and it was cheaper and more annoying to work with, which wasn't very fun at the time, but I did eventually get used to it. It's not very good when it's wet for sculpting, it feels like, but once I was carving and sanding, once it had like all dried, it turned out pretty good. So you'll see that I painted the head, arms, and legs first with glue and then white primer, although it's not very obvious on video because all these things are white. The body got just the primer with no glue because it's polymer clay, and I didn't, need to seal it the way that I tried to with the air dry clay. After I did the primer and everything, I drilled holes using a hand drill into both the head and the body for the hair and the tail. This is to copy the rooting process that they use in vinyl dolls, and I wasn't sure if it would work at all, so you'll get to see how that looks in a minute. I copied the bang and mane arrangement that one of the Takara pony owners had posted on the MLPTP forums, which is why she has 3 rows of hair holes and a perpendicular set of rows for the bangs. Fun fact, most 1980s G1 vinyl My Little Ponies have just 2 rows of hair holes. It was probably best for me to make those 3 rows anyways, because I didn't want to put those holes really close together, because I was worried about weakening the clay. So instead I spread them out and I just made sort of alternating sections for where the holes went. I did this before painting because I thought it would be a little bit neater, so then when I was painting I just painted over the holes, and the thin layer of acrylic was easy enough to sort of punch through once I was rooting the head. I don't own any nylon hair, and I wanted to use materials I already had, so the color of this pony was actually depending on the type of hair I could find. And I happen to have a bunch of this nice blue yarn, so I did a light blue body to go with it. I unraveled the strands of hair prior to punching them into the head with a cut sewing needle, and it worked surprisingly well, even though it's not vinyl, which is how I usually see this method used. I added normal glue inside the head to keep the yarn in so I could style it better, and I'll save more of that for the final reveal. So here are the digital and real life versions of both of the ponies. Obviously, I think the main thing is that the one that I made in real life has a smaller head than the other one. So I think she's a little bit less accurate, but she still is very cute. Here is the final reveal of the 3D model, plus all of the extras that I made, including adding like a little piece with a horn and some wings in case people wanted those additions, and then the 2 different poses for the fakey babies. And I also made some like accessories which are based off of Takara's catalogs. I don't know if any of these were actually produced for the public because a lot of the Takara ponies have not been like found on the market or anything like that. The 3D file for these is completely free. It's online on itch.io and I think another like 3D printing website. I based the method of her joints off of Delightful's bunny doll. So once it is 3D printed, it will need to be drilled through, and then a metal rod will have to be inserted with hooks in order to string an elastic through all of the joints. My real life sculpted doll, like I said, her head ended up a little bit small for some reason, but I think she looks proportional when she's by herself. It's just in comparison to the original Takara. You can tell she's not quite as chibi. I obviously based her outfit and everything on the original Takara doll. Her yarn hair turned out pretty good, I think. Despite being yarn, I like brushed it out a little bit, and I used an iron to smooth it flat as much as possible. Here's her with all of my various dolls that I've made in the past. You can see my wire doll, my ball jointed doll, etc. And they're all happy to have a new little My Little Pony friend to put on the shelf next to her. Unfortunately, I couldn't find my actual My Little Pony Twilight Sparkle to put with all of these guys, but that's alright. These are all ones that I handmade, so it's maybe more appropriate. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, leave like a like and a comment or whatever you want in the comment section. Oh, and subscribe. I think I'm supposed to tell you to do that too. My very last thing is shout out to Jenny Nicholson, because it was through her Twitter that I learned about the Takara My Little Pony dolls. Even though I was a huge fan of My Little Pony for a really long time, I had actually never heard of the Takara My Little Pony crossover. So, fun fact.